You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and this is 6 Degrees of John Keel.
Hello and welcome to the 6 Degrees of John Keel podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Barbara Fisher. With me today is Lucinda Morel. She's a very interesting person. She's an experiencer. And like me, she's been having experiences since she was a child. And she's also a writer. And she has a lot of thoughts today. So please welcome with me, Lucinda. Lucinda, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I am working from home by myself. And so the thinking is off the charts. I'm just home alone with my thoughts, which is always so big and dangerous.
Yeah. And it's exciting too sometimes because you're a mom and alone with your thoughts doesn't happen very often with moms, really.
Right.
You know.
And so they all have to come quickly because it's like they're all trying to get in.
Yeah, it's like Conjunction Junction in the old, Saturday morning,
Yes.
learning cartoons. There's these trains and they're going fast and sometimes they drop off a thought. Sometimes they go by so fast you can't catch them and there you go.
Yeah, so I'm in the what's your function?
Well, that's a good place to be though. You have choices. And may your trains run slowly enough for you to catch them. That's
thank you.
The best I can tell you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right,
Thanks.
So we've already recorded, and nobody's heard it because something went awry. Everybody hears this on my podcast. Something happened. I don't know what it was, but we don't know what it was. But her recording turned out to be she was here and not, and here and not, and here and not. So I decided to record again. So this is a pleasant surprise for me that we get to record again. So Lucinda, you told me this great story. And it was like at the beginning because you were a child. So can you retell that one to me? Because it's a really good one and I know everybody's going to like it.
Yeah. So we were, I think from listening to your podcast and listening to you and Morgana talk about your experiences, it was pinging me because I'm also curious about the generational experiencer subject, right? And how the weirdness, the gene of woo and how it is passed down from generation to generation and how the different generations interact with it, because I think it also changes and evolves as it moves down lineages. So in my own exploration of kind of where I'm at and understanding my father had essentially almost the same experience as Whitley Strieber about 3 months after Whitley. So in 1986, he told me about the dream that was not a dream, like too real to be a dream. But he basically went on to tell me this whole encounter, including a rape, essentially, as Whitley. And this is coming from my father. And I'm like 12 when this is happening, but he and I are very close. And he was just like, this is what happened, this is how it went down. And it was so jarring for both of us. I was the first person he told, essentially because, he was out in the front yard the next morning. Our bedrooms, my parents' bedroom is right next to my bedroom in the house that we grew up in. with the two windows facing the front of the house. And he kind of said,
Mm-hmm.
Saturday mornings in the 80s, you would find my dad sitting in the front yard on a plastic lawn chair with a cup of coffee, the scratchy sheet from the horse races, and a pack of Marlboro Lights, right? Just pretty much almost everybody's dad in the 80s, but and so, because he would work on the lawn or whatever. And so that morning I went outside to get some sun. It was spring and just starting to warm up. And he asked me, because our bedrooms were right next to each other, he's like, hey, last night, did you see that bright light in the front of the house? And I'm like, no. And he was like, you didn't see the light that was in front of the house? Like, he was just so, well, now I think he was in shock, right? At the time, it was just like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
What's wrong with this guy, right? But he had explained, I had a dream, but it didn't feel like a dream. It was so real. And there was a light, and I went outside, and it was a ship. And so he goes on to explain it's a ship, like a craft. I'm thinking pirate ship when he said ship. This is how far from my reference this thing is, right?
Oh, that's amazing.
Because he said there was a ship. And he's had a dream. And I'm so, in my head, I'm thinking Peter Pan, I'm thinking a pirate ship.
Yes.
That was the imagery. And he was like, no, like a UFO, like a flying saucer. And I was like, oh, that? Like, And he said he was on the craft and that there were different panels. And he said, I remember he said around each panel there was Egyptian writing, like hieroglyphics, but he said Egyptian writing.
Neat.
And then he said each panel was like a moment in Earth's time. So he saw something that looked kind of like dinosaur kind of,
right.
Something that looked more futuristic. Something he said he saw, which is pretty funny. He saw a boxer from the 1930s, or the 40s, I think, like in downtown LA.
Interesting.
Like it's called the Jim Jeffries building. But anyway, just some weird things. And then he goes, and then I saw them. And I'm like, who? And all he could say was, Mija, they talk to you with their eyes. Like they don't. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, they have these big eyes. No, he said, they talk to you with their mind. And he said, they have these big eyes. And I was like, ugh, like, draw it for me. Right. And he got his little scratchy sheet, right. And on the little margin started to draw what I thought was a guitar pick. Right. Because the little triangle face of the gray. And so I thought it was like a guitar pick kind of thing. And then showed me the eyes and just like, ew. And it was, I think a year later that I'm, again, 80s, I'm a latchkey kid. Like I got myself up to school, locked the door, walked to school in the morning, got dressed, all by myself, and then walk home from school. I come in, turn on the TV, as all kids do. You throw your backpack down, you turn on the TV, and then you like go get a snack, right? And then walk back into the room. And Oprah was on. Oprah used to be on at like 3:00, right?
Yep, I remember.
In middle of Oprah. And all I saw was the cover of Communion. And I was like, holy crap. Like that, I was just like, by the time my dad got home, I was like, don't put anything down. Let's go to Romans. That was it's still there, this really nice bookstore in Pasadena, right? I was like, we got to go to Roman. There's this book and the guy, and he saw the thing, and he knows about the thing and your dream. And well, and my dad was like, what? And as I was explaining it to him,
you're talking so fast.
Yeah. He was, I'm doing the kid ramble, right? La, 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 la,
Mm-hmm.
But in the ramble, he's starting to process like, what? And so he was just like, no, let me get home. It turned into that thing. And then the next thing I know, the book was in the house. So he he heard it. He just didn't want me there.
Yeah.
It was one of those situations. So that's kind of where that started. Much, much later in life is where I started to kind of see my own points in it and my own experiences and understand what that was, which got me going back again to lineages. And so this is the story I told you that that we didn't record. I had to talk to I talked to my dad about that experience and realized, my dad's the oldest of 8, and he was born in Phoenix, so the family's from Phoenix, and then moved to Los Angeles in the early days of Los Angeles, like early 40s. So downtown LA is still kind of growing, and it's still very kind of suburban. But when they first moved to Los Angeles, they lived in the San Fernando Valley. And in the San Fernando Valley, which is adjacent to Los Angeles, county, I guess, there used to be a lot of walnut groves. So it was still kind of agriculture area there. And my aunt, who is my father's sister, has always been very, very psychic. And she used to talk. So, of course, I come from this family of, my father's and his 8 siblings, there's 8 of them, and they lived in a haunted house. Aunt is totally psychic. So growing up, hearing stories about the haunted house they lived in, the ghosts, this, that, like, it was very open. Like, it just is, like that. That the phenomenon just is, and it's not something that was ever shamed or hidden or anything like that. And so my aunt had a story about the fairies and seeing fairies as a child. She would, as I'm getting older, like from my perspective as a little girl, my aunt always painted, and she would paint really beautiful fairies and pixies and things. Like, she could just like nature scenes, elements, and things like this. And was also, a writer and just all around creative person. And she later, as an adult, I'm like, oh, I think she's painting this because she's had an experience, right? Like, you don't make those connections as you're growing up. You're just the kid, and you realize you have this creative, and then when you're adult, you're just like, oh my God, I was surrounded by creative people. She says that when she was young, she must have been, I'm going to say somewhere around 5, that she used to go with her father, which is my grandfather, to work in the walnut groves in Van Nuys. So my grandfather had a job out there. I'm not sure what he was doing, but he would bring his little girl with him because, daddy. She was like a total daddy's girl. She wanted to be with him all the time. And so he would be working, and she would just be out in the walnut groves. And there was one tree that had died. And so it was just like a flat stump, almost like a stump that you could sit on or something. And there were flowers growing all around it. And I don't know if somebody planted a garden there or what, and, this is her little girl mind. So she doesn't know. She just knows there's a lot of flowers planted around this stump. And she used to play in the stump a lot. And she said that there was always fairies at the stump or around the stump. And so when she would get there, she would run to this little place, to the stump where she used to like to play. And the fairies would like dart and hide behind the other trees. And being a little girl, like with her like hands on her hips, she would say, "I see you," like, "Come out of there," right? She's a little kid that's just kind of like, "What are you doing there?" And these are little tiny beings, like little humanoid, pixie, winged beings. And she would play with him all the time. And they would have like a fun little hide and seek banter from what I'm putting together of this. And that they would give her caramels. And I was like, that was a part of the story. I was like, what? And she was like, they would give me caramels. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, like, sometimes I would see them, like, they would leave them on the stump for me, little candies. And one day she has a caramel and she's eating it. And she walks over, as little kids do. They're wandering, right? Mouthful of caramel. And she sees her father. And my grandfather says to her in Spanish, ¿Qué tienes en tu boca? Like, what do you have in your mouth? Like, what are you eating? Like any parent would to a toddler or young child. Like,
what did you find?
Yes. What did you find that you have now put in your mouth? And she would, chew in this mouthful of caramel, candy. And she said, the fairies gave me the candy. Now, caramels are easy to get now, but in those days of the early 40s, like especially poor families, you weren't going to have candy accessible to you, right? And so I can only imagine what my poor grandfather is thinking. Like, somebody's trying to lure my child, or somebody's trying to poison my child, or like, who's giving my kid candy, right? Because what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, candy was a big treat,
Yeah.
So he was just like, don't eat that. And he would say, he told her, like, don't eat what they give you, which can be taken a couple of ways, right? Because he also kind of retained a lot of our indigenous, like, lore, and he had a lot of how do I say, there was still like a lot of mannerisms that my grandfather carried over from our our indigenous roots, specifically certain planting techniques and talking about how to plant and the seeds, and like, my love of gardening and my father's comes from my grandfather, right? But the way I don't know, right. Now I start to think, and the more time I have spent with Native American cultures and representatives and healing and working in those communities, I'm just like, oh, I wonder if he knew something, don't eat what they give you, which I think is really telling. So that was her fairy story. And to this day, she'll say, no, absolutely, it was a fairy. And she and I have talked about this, and I'm trying to, and Barbara, I think this is how, it might have been one of the first things I asked you, right? Of like, she says that there was a certain book that came out in the 70s about fairies that has the exact picture of the fairy she saw as a little girl. And that's why I was at.
Was it the Brian Froud book?
No, those are the ones.
I think it probably was.
Probably. That's the closest to the thing that I saw, to the entity that I saw myself.
So earlier than that, there was a book that came out in 1950 that's called The Big Golden Book of Elves and Fairies. And Jane, hold on, let me get her name in my head.
I'm going to write this down.
Big Golden Book, Elves and Fairies. Okay, there we go. I think it's Jane Warner Watson, but I'm going to make sure. There's the cover. Okay, make bigger, stop being evil. Yeah, it's Jane Werner, Werner Watson.
Okay.
She was the editor, and it was illustrated by Garth Williams.
Okay.
And this book was probably somewhat expensive in 1950 because it's full color and it's an oversized book. And there have been reprints, but the colors aren't as good as some of the originals. that is a book that my dad and my dad's sister Judy had as children. That was given to them by one of their aunts. And my Aunt Judy also saw fairies and heard angels and all kinds of things. But those illustrations are probably from that time period, extremely evocative for people. There are earlier illustrations by Arthur Rackham that could also be involved. He did illustrations for the J.M. Barrie books about Peter, Pan, and Wendy.
Oh,
that's another possibility.
Oh yeah,
So,
I'm looking at this cover.
If she went to a library,
Look, I just
that's
found it on
my
it's on Amazon for
style.
Amazon for $237. Give me a break, people.
Yep, that's one of the older ones. You can get reprints, and you can get some of the older ones in less good condition for less than that.
Okay. Anyway, so that's my aunt's story. Now
that's a possibility.
Here's the weird thing about that story. Fast forward decades to my aunt's experience, and knowing that story, I am at Contact in the Desert, which ironically is about to happen. It actually starts today. I was at Contact in the Desert.
Yeah, I was going to say it's this week, isn't it?
I was there 2017. I believe it was 2017 or 2018, one of those. And Contact in the Desert is always like this time of year, like May, June. And that August, I was planning on attending an event in like the Washington state, right on the border of Oregon. There's a property that is very known to have a lot of high strangeness, a lot of Bigfoot activity, and a lot of fairy activity. And the rule going in is, if anything goes missing, it's probably the fairies. Just ask them nicely and they'll give it back to you, hopefully. And that's kind of the thing. So I'm about to go to this property in a couple of months, and had told the owner of the property was there at the conference. And I said, oh yeah, hey, I'm going to be at your place in a couple of months. And like, okay, so I finished talking to him, and there's a chair, and I'm doing the thing that happens at conferences where you have your bag and all your conference stuff and your schedule. And so now I got to organize everything. So I'm not far from the owner, and I'm kind of muddling through my stuff in my backpack. And these like two or three other women go up to this person, and they say, oh, we're going to go next month to your property, and we really want to have an encounter with fairies. And so we're bringing crystals, and we're bringing, what did they say? Like crystals and little mirrors and toys to try to have like a fairy encounter. Do you have any recommendations? And he says, yeah, you can bring all that, but what they really like is caramels. I was like, I stopped at that. Yeah. And I was like, I just froze, and I was like, no way. Like, that was the only other time. Granted, I never really did any kind of fairy research, but that resonated.
That kind of just popped right out. The thing about the little people, the good folk, is one of the traditional gifts that were offered in Ireland and Scotland was butter. And you could, sweeten it a little bit with honey. So what is that? Caramel is nothing but butter and sugar. Because you melt the sugar and you brown it, and then you stir in butter and cream. Cream is another one that you pour out for the little people. So, yeah. That's It resonates completely. I carry around Werther's. That's
Me
my
too.
bribe. Because it's, again, butter
Yeah,
and
me
sugar.
too. Not-
So that's my bribe that I carry with me in case something untoward might
That's
happen.
so funny. Like I have, if I'm going to go,
Yeah, but they
if
also
I'm
like
going somewhere naturey or foresty or something like that, I'm gonna have the Werthers, the soft ones. I don't get the hard candy. I think they just want the soft ones because we have to give them that. And like I'll have that and
Yeah.
tobacco and sweetgrass. those are my go-tos.
Yep.
For the offerings.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so that was my aunt's experience. What I saw in South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I don't know. Did I tell you that last time about that experience on the reservation?
I
Yeah,
think you did. Go
we
ahead and tell it. I'm pretty
I
sure
can't
you
remember.
did, but
Um, a small group of us, conference goers and speakers, were invited to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. Um, they wanted to speak to some experiencers to kind of swap stories on like the star people and star knowledge and like what have you learned and what have you learned, right? And so Whitley Strieber
right.
was in that group, and he writes about that in A New World, his book A New World. He writes, yeah, he
A New
writes
World.
about that experience. He was having some weird time slip stuff. Terry Lovelace was there, Yvonne Smith, a bunch of mostly from Yvonne's Ciro group. Yvonne was one of the speakers, and so that's kind of how we got the invitation. So maybe about 20 people, 20 or 30 people, speakers and conference goers in the same house, essentially in a big house on this beautiful property on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And we were going to be invited to a Sundance ceremony. So in the for the Lakota to invite outsiders to a Sundance is very, very, it's a high honor. And you also have the added burden of like, do not mess things up. There are a ton of protocols
Yeah.
and things you do and things you don't do. And so we were going to try to be as invisible as possible and not not call attention to ourselves. And
Right.
just be there as guests and try to participate as best we could. So the first thing that had to happen was there, I should say, we got to the house, which is this beautiful 2-story house that, like, the back of the house, the front of the house is the road. So from the road, you get to the front of the house, and on the back of the house, you see like the split, like the two stories, and it overlooks backing into this big canyon forest. Right, it's all you see are just trees, and some of it is flattened out for the Inipi. Like there's the sweat lodge there, and there's teepees there in the back and sitting areas, but most of it is pretty dense forest, and you can't really tell what's back there. So I immediately put my bags down and I run out to go stand on this back balcony that overlooks this foresty area, and you can see it clears, like on the left you'll see like this open field, right? And that's as you're looking down into a canyon, there's the kind of this open field that's flat, and that's where the teepees are, and kind of a bench area, garden, things like that. And then just to your right, there's just what appears to be a fencing of thick trees, like forest that has not been cleared. and there's some sort of clearing behind it, but I can't see what it is from there, from that balcony, and I haven't walked down there yet. So I'm taking a moment, and I can see that they have on the property, there's a horse, horses in a corral, kind of, there's a pen over there. Okay, looking around. And immediately I hear behind, very close, and behind this little tree line, a deep hoot. And it was like, whoo, and like really, really deep. And funny, the first thing that I popped in my head was like a moose, because of the size, because like, oh, that's something. But then I thought, no, because a moose makes that weird whistly, like the caribou, like they just make it doesn't sound like a deep.
Right.
And I thought to my head, do it again. And it did it again. And it just went, whoo, whoo, like this deep. And I thought, all I could think of was like, wow, this is something with a really, like they must have a bull in the pen on the other, there must be a pen on the other side of the trees. And that's a bull, or like a buffalo or something, maybe, it's Pine Ridge, maybe there's bison. I don't know. Okay. I didn't think anything of it. Then they call everyone down. Okay, we're going to gather, blah, blah, blah. I go downstairs and I ask by this time I have met a couple of the locals that are working on the property. And I go, hey, what do you guys have in the back there? Do you have you have bull or buffalo or something? And they kind of laugh, and they crack the joke of like, oh, what, you think that all the Lakota have like a buffalo in their backyard or what, like that kind of thing. And I go, no, I heard the big animal you have in the back. And they're like, there's the horses are there. And I was like, no, not where the horses are, behind the trees in the wood line. And then like one of them looks at the other one, and they share a look, and they go, there's nothing there. And then they just they shut me down. And I'm like, huh. And so now, we go through a little bit of conference protocols. Here's what we're going to do, lecture. And then now so Friday night, we are going to do an Inipi ceremony, which is the sweat lodge, right? So for those who don't know, you're in the sweat lodge. The way it works is outside you have your 2 fire keepers, which were the 2 guys that I had talked to earlier. And it was, I think I can name them because they were buddies for a while, although they're off doing their thing. But it was Carlos and James. Okay. So Carlos and James are the fire keepers, and they're keeping the fire. Your sweat lodge is right next to it. And then behind it starts the forest. Okay. So we're right on the kind of the edge of this big tree lined forest. And the way an Inipi ceremony works is that you're in there for 4 rounds. We're going to do 4 rounds. They're going to put the hot coals in you. It's basically, you're in a sweat. Inipi is really the word because it's more of a sacrament, if you will. It's a sacred thing. When you are in the Inipi, you are in the womb of creation. So you're in a very safe and sacred place. And it's wonderful in there, even though it's really freaking hot, and it's just going to get hotter because it's 4 rounds. And I've never done this before. And so all I'm thinking in my head is, Lucinda, do not embarrass yourself. Don't pass out. Don't throw up. Like, just hang in there. Like, make it work, right? When you go in clockwise. And the women go first, and then the men. So if you picture a clock, let's say the door is at 6. So the women have to go in to 7, and you're going to move all the way to 5 or 6, right? And then your facilitators are going to be right at 6 because they're at the door, and you're drumming and doing all their good stuff. Outside are your 2 fire keepers. We got Carlos and James, and they're feeding the fire in between the rounds. So they're bringing in the hot coals, and then they're going to pour water and good stuff inside. And so here we go. So round one, I'm just happy that I made it through round one. Round two, something happens where I'm sitting like crisscross applesauce, as the kiddos say, and something moves across the front of my legs from the side, kind of my left side of my leg, and it passes towards the front of my left leg, front of my right leg, and moves to my right. And whatever it was, I'm thinking, oh, there might be like a critter in here, right? Like, okay, so clearly there's some sort of critter in here with me. Don't freak out. Just stay still, stay in the moment. Something passes from my left to my right. But the weird thing is that it passes my full leg, so it's got to be tall. So it has to be at least like 6 or 7 inches long, because like my legs are folded, but we're kind of scrunched up in that sweat, right? Like in the inipi. So like, I'm hunched, and then, to my right is Stephanie. And so that was round 2. And then now round 3, and it's getting hotter. And I'm like, whew, okay. So I do the thing that I'm sure most people would probably do. I am assuming most people would do this, where I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to tap out for a little while and just leave my body, because this is getting a little too intense. And I'm not, you know how when you're in you're in this like sacred space, and you're trying to have a sacred experience, but there's this discomfort, and there's this like, am I doing it right? I'm trying to have my own experience, but they're singing and talking, and I'm trying to listen to you, but I really don't want to listen to you, but I don't want to be rude. All this stuff is in my head, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm just going to leave my body and peace out for a little while. So I do this kind of astral projection thing, and I move up, and all of a sudden, like, I feel my astral body move up and out of the inipi. And there's this huge body of energy, huge, 9 feet tall, like 2-3 feet wide, and it's a being, and it's pacing along right outside the inipi, behind the women, only behind the women. So think 12 to 6, 12 to 6, 12, like 12 to 5 or 4, actually, just behind the women. And I'm like, what is that? And I'm looking at it, and it was invisible, but I can't even say invisible. It was clear. That's the best way to describe it. Like when you're looking at a really beautiful, crystal clear stream of water, like it was this clean energy of this, like, what is that? Like, what is alive and conscious, but that is this pure and beautiful? It was just this really, I think if I say divine, people think like that white light, and it wasn't that. It was just clear, like a clarity I can't describe. And I was like, wow, like, what is that? And I was like, well, but it is something. So I should probably get back into my body, because I don't want to pop out too much from this NEP, because what if I can't get back in, right? So I move back into my body.
Yeah.
And that was so that's the end of round 3. So now, end of round 3, and the doors open, because the fire keepers are going to bring in hotter coals. And so they do that, but then Carlos jumps in for the last round. And we're like, oh, okay, everybody scoot over. Carlos is coming in. And it's like the thought was like, oh, he wants to like join us for the prayers for the last rounds. Like a firekeeper wants, it's like he's coming into church for the end of church. Okay, sure. He's joining us.
Yeah.
And the thing closes, and we finish that last round. And when it's over, of course, I'm sitting at like 4 or 5 o'clock because I was one of the first in, so I get to be one of the first out. And all I'm thinking of was that afterward is like, great, Lucinda, you did it. That was pretty awesome. But don't forget that there is only one shower up there, and there's like 30 people, and I'm gonna make a beeline for that shower. I am not waiting to be all sweaty from a sweat lodge, So I get out. That was great. Love you guys. Peace out. I run up to the house, and I'm like the first in the shower. So now that I'm the first out of the shower, everybody's in doing all their stuff, and so I'm now out of the shower, and I go back to that balcony where I heard that sound. So this is like a second floor balcony that just overlooks the forest, and it's beautiful, and I just like to sit out there. And it's summer, so it's hot and it's lovely out there. So I go out there, and Carlos, who is the firekeeper who joined us in that last round, Carlos is sitting there. Like I walk out to this balcony, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, oh, sorry. Like I turn to my right, and I see that like Carlos is sitting there, and I was like, oh, hi, Carlos. Are you okay if I'm out here? And he's like, yeah, does that kind of thing. And he says, are we allowed to cuss on this podcast? I'll say
a little bit. Yeah, you're fine.
I'll try to be conscious. He goes,
don't worry too much.
You guys all come out here, and you bring all your crap with you. And I go, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't like being here with you guys. And I was like, what? And I was like, ooh, do tell, right? Because this is every day for us, right? I was like, so what happened? So according to Carlos, he said I should have known something was up, something was wrong, because when the firekeepers start, they prepare the inipi, right? So you have to start getting the hot coals into the sweat lodge and stuff to start warming the thing up. And when you do that, what happens is that like whatever mice are in there, because it is the forest, you're outside in the forest. So whatever critters are in there, they run out the front door. And what they do is they come out the front door that's like at 6 o'clock, right? And then they turn and they move back toward the forest, right? And so he said what happened was mice came out of the sweat lodge. They came out of the inipi, and they ran towards the fire, which was not natural.
Oh.
Like, in other words,
yeah, that is weird.
They wouldn't go back to the forest. They ran to the fire. And he's like, that is very wrong. Like already, like, he's already, freaking out. He said that during round 2, there was a huge UFO over us. Just hovering over the sweat. And then he said in round 3, he said there was a Bigfoot right behind you guys right behind you in the tree line. And I was like, was it pacing? I was like, was that a Bigfoot? I was like, was that a Bigfoot? Come on, tell me. And he goes, it scared the crap out of me. And he goes, it scared me so bad that I jumped into the CDP with you guys. So while we're all thinking like, oh, Carlos is going to pray with us, he's just like, oh no, I'm terrified. There's a Bigfoot
he is
outside. Yeah. And he's just like, I'm jumping in with you guys. We're all going to go down together, whatever. Or he's going to throw us at the Bigfoot. You take these people first. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. The second thing that I noticed was right after I talked to Stephanie, and I'm talking to Stephanie, and Stephanie says, something walked by me or something moved past me. Now, remember, she was to my right. And then I said, something moves past me too. And she goes, did you feel it? You know, we're doing this thing. She was like, did you feel that thing? And I said, yeah, what was that? And then we both went like at the same time. We did like the hand measurement, like it was this tall. Like we both did this, you know, and it was like the same height, you know. And I said, it walked past me and it walked toward it. It moved towards you. Like it felt like a scurrying of a creature. I don't know, kind of soft, something just moved past us. And she was like, what was that? And I'm like, I got no idea. So that was interesting to have Stephanie feel that thing too. And keep in mind, it's very hot in those sweats. So like, there should not be any other living creature other than a human being and, you know, whatever spirits are coming in to talk to the people in that. So that was really weird. But that whole NEP is the purification that allows you to attend the Sundance. So the next day we attend the Sundance. And the way the schedule is written is that we are going to go to the Sundance and then we're going to do a CE5 out in the Black Hills, which is already like just one of those is more than enough for like a week.
Yeah, for one day. Yeah.
But we're going to do them two, you know, we're going to do both in a day. So we get to the Sundance and keep in mind, like it's like a morning of protocols. And thank God that we had locals and elders come in and they sat us down and they said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's what you can expect. Here's what we expect of you. It's, first of all, absolutely no cell phones, no tech. Don't bring any tech. Don't bring any shiny jewelry. It distracts the spirits. You know, be reverent. This is a prayer. And they go on to describe like every aspect of this ceremony has a significance, and like the buffalo significance is huge. And so anyway, we were well prepared, albeit very nervous. We got there. Whitley immediately goes in there and just starts doing the dance. Like he's in there, like he's around the arbor supporting the dancers, and everybody's in the middle of this prayer. Terry got in there too. Like I was kind of like looking around and watching, and then we get in there and start dancing. And all of a sudden someone says, look at that. What is that? And there's a huge silver sphere that's about, God, 300-400 feet above the Sundance. And Sundances happen on the summer equinox, right? Or summer solstice. Summer solstice is what I want to say. Yeah. And so I'm looking at this silver metallic looking ball that is not moving, and it's in the air. And all of us are just looking at this craft that's just watching the Sundance. And it looks very similar to what we're seeing now in the UFO, like that Mosul. If you look at the Mosul craft, which looks like a big silver ball that's just moving, but this was completely stationary. In fact, like I stopped to kind of get my bearings, and I looked around and I could see off in the distance, there were some trees, you know, some taller trees, and I was watching the trees, and then I would watch when the breeze would move the tops of the trees. So like, okay, the trees are moving. That means there's a wind here, and it's about equidistant, and here's the craft, and the craft would not move. And it stayed there for at least, I'd say a good 30, at least 30 minutes. And everybody's there. Like the people see it, we see it. Like I had to laugh because I thought this is probably this is a hugely significant mass sighting, you know, that no one's ever going to know about. Here is this would be like the mass sighting of all mass sightings, and no one's going to know about it. And this freaking craft knows that. This craft knows that nobody has a cell phone here because it's totally not allowed because, you know, the locals won't just, you know, if you have a phone and you're taking pictures, they're not just going to say, sir, we're going to ask you to leave that phone in your car. They're going to take you and your phone and they're going to drive you off the res and they're just going to dump you there and you're not coming back in, right? So, to say they take it seriously is not an understatement. Then the last part of the Sundance, it's the last day. It's the last part of the Sundance, which a significant thing happens. It's kind of like the culmination of the 4-day Sundance. These Sundancers have been dancing for 4 days and 4 nights without food, you know, maybe minimal water, if any water. I didn't even think they were sipping anything, but, and it culminates with the day. So the final piece of this ceremony is about to happen. And we're told it's time to go. And like a bunch of us, I'll say about a handful of us, are in it. Like we have been dancing this, like we're almost in this prayer trance with the group, you know, and to be pulled out of that, like just felt very wrong for us. So I asked James, who was, you know, the firekeeper James, who was also our driver. And I was like, a few of us want to just stay. And he was like, yeah, you know, I'll drive you back after. So we kind of told the gang, you know, we may skip this CE5 in the Black Hills, or we'll try to meet you later. But a few of us are going to stay. Whitley, I forgot to mention this. Whitley had sprained his ankle right as we arrived, like right before arriving to this conference. So he wasn't staying at the house with us because of the stairs. He was staying at the local little motel. And at that Sundance, he was cured. Like his ankle, like just fixed. And he like packed his stuff and came to the house because he was like, I'm fine. Like, you know, so it was really like miraculous things happen at these ceremonies. So we needed to stay. It was important to us that we finish it, and we were just called to stay. So what ends up happening, we stay for the end of the ceremony. We drive back to the house. We, you know, drive everybody home. We, you know, take care of some things. And next thing I know, it's me and the driver, and we get back to the house and everyone's in the parking lot to leave to the Black Hills. And I tell the driver, I have to run in really quick because for the Sundance, women don't wear pants, right? You have to wear a skirt. And I'm like, I've got this skirt on. And if I go to the Black Hills right now, the mosquitoes are going to eat me alive. I cannot go to this. I got to throw on my jeans. Like, you got to let me throw on like my jeans and I need to get mosquito ready, essentially. And so he says, yeah, you know, go ahead. I run in the house, I change, I come back out, and like the last car's leaving the property, and I go, can you catch up with them? And he goes, yeah, no, we're going to meet at the gas station. You know, they said it was okay. We're going to meet at the gas station. We get to the gas station and nobody's there, and they have left us. So it's me and James, and it's just us. And I'm like, oh, crap. Okay. And James goes, well, I don't know where they're going, but I'll take you where we do our ceremony, like where the locals go. And I'm like, can we do that? And he goes, yeah, come on, I'll show you something really cool. And he takes me out to this place. Ugh. Listen, I could have been left out there. I never would have found my way home. We were in this area of the Black Hills that has like this natural, like it's a natural like rock altar. And it was stunning. Barbara, I'll send you pictures. I have a couple of really cool pictures. Like it's like a
Okay.
rock altar. The formation forms like a flat altar. And so that's where we make our offerings and stuff. And then you're overlooking like the Black Hills and what these are like the grandfathers, right? And it's cool because like if you're looking at the rocks, they look like the faces of old men.
Mhm.
Like they look like humanoid faces. It's just really, really beautiful, really cool. And he says, okay,
Mhm.
he kind of like by this time, James and I are friends because on that reservation to get anywhere is at least an hour. Like everything is far in South Dakota. Everything is a long drive, right? And so you're just sitting in the car talking to people. So
Yeah.
by now we're becoming buddies. And he goes, okay, I know a little bit about your story, right? And so he goes, okay, so repeat after me, right? And so we do this prayer at this altar in front of these old grandfathers. And it's in Lakota. And he says, say da 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 da, and I say da 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 da, and say this, and I repeat the prayer. And then, we split and we do our own little private quiet time and meditations and stuff like that. And then we get back in the car and now we're leaving. And on the drive, I say, so what was that prayer? I ask him, what was that prayer? So was it like a gratitude prayer and thank you? Because that's basically all the prayers I've been hearing since I've gone to the reservation is just, grateful for the land and the water and the elements and da da da. I was like, so what was that, like a gratitude prayer? And he goes, oh no, you said you just asked them to show themselves to you. And I said, ha ha ha. I said, this is Lakota prankster, Lakota jokes. And I was like, no, but really and he goes, no, I'm serious. You basically invited them to now show themselves to you. Because you said that when you were little, they scared you so you told them not to show themselves. So you just basically like reversed that. And I was like, are you serious? Because like, I'm a high strangeness magnet. That means a little bit. I think that means a little bit more for me than it does for most people. Like now I'm having like a mini panic attack, and I'm like, what? Like, what? Can we get a literal translation of what was just said? Like, what? I need an audio recording. What was happening? Like now, I'm ready to deep dive. And he goes, "I'll be all right. You can handle it." And that was it. I was like, what? It was wild. So now we get back to the house finally. And I get back upstairs to we're all like, it's a big open room and everyone has like a little mattress sleeping bag situation, right? And so of course, what do? I meet up with all the women because now the CE5 has concluded and everybody is now converging back to the house. And so, of course, they were like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? And I was like, we lost you. And this, so we were comparing stories like, well, what did you guys see? What do you guys see? And I'm okay saying I had the much better experience, but because they're like, we saw lights in the sky. And I was like, yeah, man. But did you meet the grandfathers? At the rock altar, like, just like, okay, good for you guys. And the girls and I, there's like a couple of us that were just like, we are so buzzed on the day and everything that has happened. We're just like, most people are just exhausted and want to go to sleep, but there's like three of us that are just like, no way, man, we're just buzzing with energy. So we're like, let's ask Carlos if he will build us a bonfire next to the teepees in the forest. And we're like, yeah. So we go out to Carlos. Can you build us a fire outside? He's like, yeah, come on, right? It's like every day for them. He's like, sure. So we stayed out down in the forest clearing next to the teepees, sitting around the fire, talking. And it was beautiful. And now it's like 2:30 in the morning. And we're like, we got to go to bed. And Carlos says, okay, so don't walk up back to the house, because like you have to kind of hike up back to the house. He says, don't hike, just jump in the truck, and then I'll drive you guys, around the road and drop you off. And so we said, okay. Now, the way that clearing works. So like I said, it's almost like picture two squares, like the top half, of a quadrant, right? And then one square to the left is cleared, and that's where the inipi is, and the teepees, and the fire pit. And then there's this line of tall, what I'm calling the foliage, right, in another, that kind of encloses the other quadrant. And the reason why that center is so tall is because there's a creek. So what I'm realizing is, because I'm just seeing like these tall trees, but what I'm realizing, well, they're tall because they run along a creek. And so this big property is kind of, it's moving right through it are these tall trees, because there's a little creek there. And so, as you would find in something like that, you don't want people just running into the bushes and falling into the creek. So there's like a little 1 foot fencing along what looks like shrubs, but right on the other side of the shrubs is this, trench with this creek running through it. And there's a little bridge where you can cross over to the other side. That's where I thought the big animal was, which now I'm thinking was Bigfoot. And
probably
you have to walk over a little bridge. There's this huge tree that's hollowed out because it was struck by lightning. Ding, ding, ding. And so creek with water. Right at it is a huge hollowed out tree trunk that is split into, and there's a little bridge that crosses you over. So we are now in Carlos's truck. So picture Carlos is driving. I'm sitting in the middle. Joan Bird is to my right. And then Stephanie is behind me, asleep in the back seat. And Carlos does the thing where he turns on the headlights, like he snaps on the headlights, throws the truck in reverse, and does the thing where he puts his arm, you put your arm behind the person to your right, and then you got the steering wheel, and you're looking back to do like a 3-point turn. So he's looking back to do that. And while he does that, the headlights cast along that creek where that fencing is. And I'm probably, I don't know, 50 yards away or something, maybe. And walking along the creek is a little humanoid man-ish. I don't know what it is. And I go, oh my God, what's that? Right? Because I don't know what it is. Oh my God, what is that? And I'm pointing, and Joan is going, where? What? And what has happened is, as Carlos is backing up and the headlights are casting along that creek, that little being was in the headlight, and it was walking toward the hollowed out tree trunk. And it did the thing where it saw the headlights, and so it turned to its left to look at where the headlights were, and it saw the lights, and it like speeded up its walk in a weirdly, almost kind of a natural way. It like speeded up its walk to get out of the light. But when it turned its head to look at the light, it was looking at me, because I could see it face to face. It just couldn't see me, right? Because it just sees headlights. But it gave me like a perfect light right to him. I'm saying him because I believe it was male. But who the heck knows? It was no higher than that fence post. So that was the reference. So that fence post was maybe 1.5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So it couldn't have been more than 1.5 feet tall. And he looked like what we would consider the stature and the body type to be a gnome, except his arms were much longer and gangly and much like a Brian Frode, like where the skin was more like a bark, like a greenish brown bark, like a tree bark, than it was skin. And its fingers were long and pointed, like what you see in the old little fairy lore, right? And so the gait was kind of more like this, like a almost like a waddle, a little bit, like a hunched over waddle. And he had a very old, gnarled face with like a wide nose and just like this old, gnarled face. And my mind exploded, because then, like, how do you go to sleep after that? I went back to, this is where I'm super jealous of you, Barbara, because I went back to my little mattress and I busted out my notebook and I was like, write it all down, because you are going to explain this away, because this is crazy. I wrote it all down. And then I proceeded to try to draw him. And I can't draw. It was so wrong. And I was like, stop. And I froze that image in my mind. And I was like, because if you try to put this on paper, your mind is going to split between what he actually looks like and what you drew.
Right.
Because what I was drawing was not him. And I can't draw like that. And so all I have is the image in my head.
Wow. I love that story. Yeah. I just love that story.
And then the next day, I told Stephanie, and Stephanie was like, maybe that's what was in the Inipi with us. And so the next morning I did two things. First of all, I went to James and I'm like, WTF, James, I told you can't do that. Like, I just saw something very weird. And he said something that struck me interesting. He goes, huh, you saw one. Just like that. And I'm like, do you know what that is? And he goes, oh yeah, we all know what that is. He goes, we all know what that is here. And he goes, I'm just surprised you saw it. Like, how do you see it? And he said, well, so now that you saw it, I have to tell you what it is and what to do. In other words, like the protocol. And he was like, come outside. We went outside and he's like, this is what it is. Say it. Repeat after me. And I said it. And he goes, okay, now you said it. You know what it is. Don't ever say that name again out loud. Because now that you've seen it, if you say it, you will call them to you. And he goes, they will get in your house and they will F up your S. He goes, they won't leave you alone. They'll come into your house. In other words, you're inviting them in. And once you invite them in, very hard to get rid of them. And you can't get rid of them. And you're going to be in big trouble. So don't ever call to them. But that's what it is. The other thing after that was that Stephanie and I went out to where I saw it and went out in the grass, right? It was kind of like dewy grass in the morning. And we left a little offering out there. And I left my little caramel on that tree for them. So I left it in, I was like, okay, next thing, James, you need to take me to the liquor store. I need to buy some like Rolos or something. That was all I could find because they didn't have the Werther's caramels. So I left some candy out for them. And then interestingly, right in that same area on the grass, on the dewy grass was, have you seen a hummingbird hawk moth?
Yes, those are wonderful.
I had never seen one before, but there was one in the grass, and it was like I think it was maybe a new one. But the funny thing was, and I haven't really seen one like this, it had a bright blue dot right in the top of its forehead.
Okay, that is
like
different.
a vivid, like a peacock blue dot right on the top of his head. And he looked like his wings were wet, and because the morning was it was dewy. And so I put my hand down, and he climbed up onto my hand, and then he like climbed up my arm and climbed on my shoulder and stayed there for the rest of the day. Like I literally like sat through lectures and stuff like that and went in the house, and he just hung out on my shoulder. And then finally I needed to get on the car, I need to go to the airport. So I was like, honey, you can't come with me. And so I took him out to, to the wildflowers and just said, okay, we got to go. But that was also an interesting little thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Moths are very, very symbolic and full of oomph. I think of them as
and
they symbolize the soul, and sometimes they symbolize the souls of the dead.
Yeah. I mean, I had never seen a hummingbird hawk moth, right?
Yeah.
Now where I live now, I'll see one in the garden every now and then, but where I was living, I had not seen them. And so it was very strange to me. And they just pop up at the weirdest times.
Mm-hmm.
Moths do that.
Yeah, moths do.
So there's something to it. There's something to it. I have no idea what that is. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of this adventure is just amazing. And I understand when you say you had to fix the image of the little person in your head without trying to draw it. Because I don't always see my creatures as physical. I see them as beings made out of light, so they're kind of phasing into and out of solidity. This does not make them easy for me to draw. Yeah. But what I have been able to do is I can draw what other people have seen sometimes. I know you've heard us probably, Morgana and I, talk about Thing on the Stairs, who lives at this house and who seemed to have been in this house before we moved in, although the people we bought the house from said that they never felt anything there. And Thing on the Stairs is there to this day, although Thing does move through the house more often than it used to. It's much more comfortable with, just going wherever we are congregating. And I drew an image of what Thing on the Stairs looked like. But it never looked like that to me. It looked like that to a friend of mine and to Morgana. I have never seen him in a physical shape. I've only seen him as this gray, shimmering, sort of humanoid-shaped creature who just sort of slinks down the stairs very, very quietly and generally unassumingly, and then crouches down on the steps like a little, Smeagol, and listens. Mm-hmm. And listens to stories. Sometimes he listens to stories on the television. He likes the X-Files. I mean, whatever. He will come in when I'm recording. Sometimes I'll see a shimmer behind me, or Morgana will catch it on the video and say, "Hey, Mom." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I know." But that picture that I drew of him, Morgana was like, "Oh, you finally saw him." And I'm like, "No, I did not. I still only see him as this shimmer." Although a few months ago, he changed shape and got all active. I don't know. Maybe something was messing with the house, but he was on the top of the stairs and he had made himself big and very imposing looking. And he came hovering down the steps and wouldn't let me go past him, wouldn't let me go up the stairs to see what was going on. And I was like, okay.
Oh.
I was like, is Fox safe? And I got the feeling that, yeah, Fox is safe. Fox is sound asleep. Nothing's going to bother him. I think if Fox wasn't safe, I would have been allowed up the stairs. But he didn't want me to mess with whatever it was. So I was like, okay, I'll trust you. You've been here longer than me. All right, you do your thing, sir. But it's funny. He usually is much smaller. But that time he was big. I don't know why.
What have you posted that drawing? I want to see that drawing.
It's on my Instagram, so I can send you a link to the picture.
Okay.
He's a little pointed, round head, pointed limbs, kind of sprangly. That's what I call it, sprangly. He's got long bits of finger and elbows, sharp elbows and sharp knees, pointy feet.
Huh. Yeah. It sounds a little like that guy. I had something, no, I guess that's different. I had something very strange at another Contact in the Desert. It was the last year that Contact in the Desert was at in Joshua Tree, and I was staying in a hotel. Do we have time for one more little story?
Yeah.
I'll tell you one more little story.
Surely.
Another little creature. Oh, this one creeped me out. Okay, so when you're at Contact in the Desert, obviously, big conference, tons of stuff going on, and so what I do is I get to. This is when it was in Joshua Tree in the actual desert. So I would get to my hotel, drop my stuff in the room, check in, drop my stuff, and then get over to the conference. And then you're there at the conference all day, because then there's also lectures all day, and then there's sky watches at night, and there's always something and a million friends and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm having a great time. So when I get home at well after midnight, I do the thing that I forget to do, the thing that I usually do when I go into a hotel room, which is to clear the space. I did not clear the space. And I was in the middle of the desert at a UFO conference. So this is all mixed for a bad idea. So what ends up happening is that 5 o'clock in the morning, I am sleeping. I'm by myself in my hotel room. I'm sleeping on my back. And, when you're married and you fall asleep in a big double bed or a king bed, you kind of stay, like you find yourself, you're still on your side of the bed, which is that weird thing. I should just hog up the whole bed, but I've been married for so long that I just I'm still on my side of the bed. So I'm on my side of the bed and I'm sleeping on my back, and it's funny. This is hard to explain. I'll just say my astral body woke up before my physical body. So it's almost like my mind splits in two, and my astral body says, wake up. And it's like, looking around the room. And so my physical body is starting to rouse, because my astral body is looking up at the headboard, and on the headboard is this creature that has his feet are clawed, and he has these big long feet, and so they're clawed along the edges of the headboard, and he's up over on my left side on the headboard, and he's like hunched over, and he's kind of like very gnarled, kind of like the little the creature in the painting, the nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So like a thunky little being, like a chunky little hairy beastie thing,
Yeah.
is hunched over, and he's perched, like literally perched on the headboard, and he's watching me sleep. And so my astral body's like, Lucinda, wake up right now. There's this thing, right? And as I'm rousing awake, my mind says, well, that's just a dream, because my headboard is very thin and his long feet wouldn't perch on my headboard. He would fall off because it's too thin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my astral Lucinda says, you're not in your own bed. And I'm like, oh crap. And then so I start to try to wake myself up. Like I'm trying to wake myself up. And my astral body sits up in bed and like turns to the left, and this little funky guy he's going like he's making a sound,
Mm-hmm.
and he jumps on the bed like he from his perch. And of course, the hotel headboard has a long, perfect headboard that his big claws can't perch onto, because that's what he has actually been doing. And so he hops onto the bed, and here's the weird thing, Barbara. I can physically hear and feel his steps with my physical body, even though my physical body is still laying down trying to wake up, and my astral body is sitting up watching him. And he's looking at me, and he's still in that weird little hunch position, and he's going rah, 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 like he's like grumbling, like he's mad at me or something. And I can feel his feet like a heel to toe slap, like a kerthunk, like the steps go kerthunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the bed. So 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, and then I hear on the floor, and then kerthunk, kerthunk, and I'm watching him in my astral body jump off the bed, hop, step off, like jump down off my bed, and then he turns across the little kitchen, and the door of the hotel, my room door is like you would walk in and you would see a little kitchenette thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's in front of the kitchenette, and I'm expecting him to walk out the door, but he pops out, like is almost like the little portal was like 4 feet before the door.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm expecting him to walk all the way out the door, but he turned and he walked out, and like I can almost see the portal because he just went pop, and he like popped out of existence. And then like my physical body was able to like to actually like wake up.
Oh,
Maybe my
man.
astral body moved into my physical body, and I was able to, I think that's what it was. I don't think it was like a paralysis. I just think because my astral body was sitting up, my physical body, like my head and everything, like I couldn't really move it. So when I finally like moved back into my body, then I could move around, and I was just like, what was that?
Wow. Yeah, that's a big what was that? Oh man.
And the fact that it was like another creature that was kind of old and gnarled, but it wasn't trying to scare me. It was just watching me sleep. And then when I noticed it, it was just like, oh, I guess I gotta leave now. Like that was like it was muttering something, like it was grouchy, like mad at me, like, oh my God, what do you make such a big deal? I'm just over here doing this thing. Like that was the vibe I got.
I'm not hurting you, lady. I don't know why you.
Yeah. And I was just, and I also had all these symbols in my head, and
neat.
So I woke up, that I jotted them down, and then of course, it's Contact in the Desert. So now I go to the lecture, and I'm sitting in my little folding chair, and there's a girl next to me, this lady next to me who's doing like henna tattoos. And I was like, hey, does this symbol mean anything to you? She's like, no, but they're pretty. And she starts hennaing them on my arms. And so that's Contact in the Desert for you.
Do you still have the
Yeah.
symbol? You should send that too, so I can see them, because I might recognize them.
I'll send them.
You never know.
Yeah, they're on there. I just found them because I wanted to show them to someone else over this past weekend at a Zero meeting, and I found them on my Instagram. So they're there if you scroll all the way.
Okay, I'll check.
I'll follow you. Are you Barbara Fisher 8972?
Yeah, I believe that's it. And I also have
followed
one
by
that's-
Strange Familiars.
Yeah, that's it. I also
here's your
have
kitty.
6DJK something.
Oh,
Or maybe
right.
it's just 6DJK.
Okay. I need to find these pictures of your little. Yeah, I need you, or I need Tim Renner or somebody to try to draw these little creatures that I keep encountering. That would be great.
I'll give it a shot. I'll see what I can do, because I have to do art for this episode anyway, right? So we'll see what happens.
Oh yeah, fun. That'd be cool.
Yes. I love drawing other people's creatures, so that'll be fun.
Oh God, well, I need you in my life because I see a lot of creatures.
Well, yeah, and I love sort of, kind of channeling what they look like from people. If I don't have a great description, sometimes I can just, pull it into reality by looking at it in my head.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, there's
So,
lots of kitty
who
pictures
knows?
on there.
Yeah, there has to be. Kitten age does not last forever. It goes by very
Nope.
fast.
Nope.
And one day he's gonna be is it King? Is King his name?
Yes.
Oh, shit.
King Clawthorne, which is from the Disney Channel's
King Clawthorne.
yeah, it's from the show The Owl House on the Disney Channel, which is a great show. Lots of creatures, lots of magic, lots of really funny stuff.
I'm moving just to charge my computer really quick. That's
Okay.
aside. Well, my kids are now. My youngest is 10, and so now I'm not watching anything. Disney Channel isn't happening that much anymore.
Yeah. It's still a good show. I think you'd enjoy it if you get around to it. If Disney
Okay.
ever allows anybody else to look at it, which they probably won't because it's Disney, but Well, thank you for coming back and telling the stories again. I think you actually told them better this time. I think you did.
Oh, good. See, that's why the spirits were like, this first show is crap.
It wasn't crap. It's just, but there was weird interference. I remember watching your video and it would just go spastic, and other faces besides yours would like sort of appear in there. And I was just like, am I hallucinating? What's happening? Okay.
Well, I'll be honest now. I'll be honest now, not to freak you out, but there has been. So I'm in a soul winter. That's what I call what's happening. So every once in a while I go through what I call a soul winter. And that means that things start to go dark in terms of, not in a bad way, not dark in a bad way, but like dark in that, like, I won't book a lot of readings. I won't get a lot of like healing stuff. And that's my symbol for, that means I need the healing. And so
Right.
what that means is that something's going to come visit me.
Okay.
Like a new teacher is going to a new teacher will present itself. And so I talked about this on Tim's other podcast, The Flowered Path.
Mhm.
So if anyone's a patron, they can listen to what's been going on with me lately. It has to do with an angel, and angels have always kind of freaked me out. But an angel and a saint,
Nice.
and a woman figure who I'm assuming is like a Virgin Mary, not Virgin Mary-ish something, has been presenting itself, and has been. I've just been working with this new kind of trio of teachers, and
Nice.
so it's so, Barbara, it's that thing of like, in the world of ufology, people don't want to talk about religion. Religion is a very trigger thing. And I hate talking about religion because I don't want people to think that I'm judging in any kind of way. But the truth is that it's a saint, and it's an angel, and it's something that's like the Virgin Mary, if not the Virgin Mary. And I can't say no to it. If a teacher presents itself, I have to make myself available to the teacher. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. No.
That's all I got.
I know. Hey, I'm
So-
a pagan witch, and I've had experiences with the Virgin Mother, so I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say no. Let's just put it that way.
That's how I, yeah. If it presents itself, listen, we have to just, we honor the divine,
Yes.
period.
In whatever form it presents itself, so long as it's not,
Yes.
blowing up things. Although even then,
Right.
well, it's
You can
really
tell
good to talk
very
with you.
quick. You can, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to talk to you too. No, I was just going to say, you can tell really quickly what's a good energy and what's not a good energy. So,
Yes, and I'm pretty good at showing the not good energies the door. It's like, okay, yeah, nice you came to see me. And then go. Thank you. Bye.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Drive
me
through,
too. Me
please.
too.
as Morgana
That's
says,
right.
thank you. Drive through, please. All right. Well, you got to come back because you've got all sorts of things that we could talk about. But I also don't want to keep you for like 3 hours and take up your whole afternoon and all of that. And my afternoon is turning into evening, so I have to think about cooking for the family.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to figure out what I'm doing about that.
Cook for me one day.
Okay, well, you're all the way over in LA, so either I'll have to come out there or we'll have to meet in the middle or something.
Okay. Done. I'll cook
all
for
right.
you. You cook for me.
All right.
Okay, Barbara. I love your mug, by the way. No one can see
thank
it on
you.
the audio, but Barbara has the
Yeah.
coolest mugs, if anyone's
Thank
curious. All
Maybe
right,
I
my
should
dear.
take a picture of them. All right, you have a
Yeah,
wonderful
post 'em.
evening, or actually, afternoon. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Afternoon. I got to go pick up kids from school.
All right, have fun. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Well, that's all for this week's episode of the 6 Degrees of John Keel podcast. If you have any questions or thoughts about the podcast or would like to come and talk about your experiences of the paranormal, you can contact us at 6djk67@gmail.com. We promise to even answer you, and we are always happy to hear from you. Thank you.